Hey
Hey,
everyone. Hi. Welcome to Murders Across Borders. This is Val,
and Kate.
and today Kate is doing the story. So today is a mental breakdown slash anxiety day. So I'm really happy to not be the one talking. I'm like, I'm gonna ride with you and just listen to her story. I
Just
might
chill.
be a little high. I'm not sure because I have edibles here and I took one because I was anxious, but I was like, yeah, maybe that was not a good idea since I'm gonna record. So if if you watch us on YouTube and you see me zone out, I apologize.
I keep doing that to you too tonight. Like, I try and fake it and be like, wait, I know what she was talking about. And then I'm like, fuck, she totally knows that I just completely like,
Yeah, it doesn't help that we both have that attention span, like, oh,
no,
squirrel.
I know. And then I'm like, oh, wait,
Oh
she was
shit.
talking. I'm invested in what you said. And I always feel so bad afterwards. I'm like, Val probably thinks I'm such a bitch. And I'm just like totally ignoring her story. And I was just like, totally spaced.
No, you're fine.
Um,
I didn't pay attention because yeah, I feel like I'm less conscious than usual.
that's not good.
Yeah. No,
Also,
it's fine.
Buster's
Just talk.
joining me. I don't know
Aw,
why he's joining me today. Usually he's out in the living room with
little
James,
baby.
and today he's joining me, and he's like the cutest little baby. And I was laughing right before the introduction because when we were clapping to make sure we were in sync, he like kept peeking his head up and he was like,
Like,
"What
what
are
the
you
fuck
doing?
you
I'm trying to
doing?
sleep." It's like, why the heck do you keep clapping? So yeah, he's like chill. But yeah, no, things have been so crazy right now because I've it's our last 2 weeks of school, and so my brain is in like writing awards and like dealing with our behavior party tomorrow. And I'm such a freaking softie. And I'm like, I'd set these rules and expectations. So it's like A's through C's can go to the swim party. You have to have your AR goal and you have to have no office referrals. Well, then we get to it and the swim party's tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, well, this kid didn't hit their AR goal, but they hit their AR goal, but not the percentage that they needed. I'm like, and then this kid didn't hit their AR goal because of behavior and messing around, but their behavior still wasn't as bad as like so and so. And then this kid has actually been like staying for tutoring and his behavior is more just because of impulsivity. And I'm just like, but it's also because at the end of the year, I'm like, this is my like those days when we go out and we're going to like a swim party at the high school pool. I'm like, I only have them for one more week. I don't really give a shit if they were
Yeah.
acting up. Like, they can have a fucking swim party. I
Yeah.
was like, okay, in the morning, I told the parents, I was like, in the morning, we're going to do free time. Well, I'm going to have game day. I'm going to teach them how to play board games and card games, and we're going to play like speed and stuff like that. So I'm going to teach them to play games. And I was like, the kids who didn't earn the swim party can do worksheet packets in the morning and then go swim. So I was like, they can work in the morning, but still go swim. I mean, now
That's
I have one.
nice.
I have one that still doesn't get to go because this kid hasn't done shit.
Oh.
Sorry. But, and like, yeah, I was like, no. And so, and so that one will not earn it. So yeah, I was like, that one, like D's and F's in every subject. And I'm like, because of just not wanting to do anything. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to worry about that one. But the other ones, I was like, they're really not that bad. They just did little things. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to be a softie and a pushover and give them their swim party. But also, like, those are the times when I bond with the kids is on
Of
these trips.
course.
And we plan all of our field trips are in like March, April, and May, or mostly April and May. And that's when I bond with the kids more and get to know them more.
Yeah.
And then it's like already the end of the year. So then I get all like more attached to them after the field trips. And now it's like the end of the year. And I'm like, why can't we do a few field trips like earlier
In the
in the
fall
year?
before winter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially since you guys start school so early, but you also finish
Yeah, like
early because here
mid-August.
here they finish school around like June 20th.
Oh, okay.
So it depends. It could be 21st, 22nd, but I don't think 23rd because 24th is our national holiday in Quebec. So yeah, and they start in on September 1st. It could be August 29th. But yeah, you guys start earlier and finish earlier. So a field trip in the fall sounds a perfect timing. Sounds like a
I
perfect
feel
timing.
like it's a good time to like do even just a small field trip just to kind of like, I don't know, you just kind of see the kids in a different way. And you
Yeah.
kind of like, I don't know. I'm so sad. I always get sad at the end of the year because I get so attached to my kids.
Of course.
And I'm like, now I only have 2 weeks left with them and they're my babies. And then also I have 3 6th grade girls that come and see me all the time. They come visit me and I give them paws, which are for like a drawing in the office. And then I give them Jolly Ranchers or stickers. So they always come see me. So I have 3 girls left from 6th grade that come see me. And now next year they're going up to the high school for 7th through 12th. And I'm not going to be able to see my girls anymore.
Aw.
No, don't bark. No.
Buster
I don't know
wants
what
you to
you-
record.
He's like, keeps talking back to me. I think he might be thirsty, but I'm not really sure. He's okay.
Yeah. Should have
but
drank
yeah.
before.
So famous last words. Remember our this will be a short one. This will be an easy one. This is gonna be like
last time was supposed to be a short one.
I swear
and
this is
I started editing it. It's like an hour and a half, so I apologize.
I don't even know how we did talk about other stuff for the first 30 minutes, which is probably where some of that came from, which is why I need to go back and like make chapters. But
Yep.
No, this
but
one
I
I was
haven't
like
posted it anyway. So.
Well, I told you I was like, this one's gonna be really short. And then it's like 11 pages. But exactly. I do it in like a column, and so it's really not that long. My thing is I get so lost, like, I don't know about you, but I find stuff in like 7 different articles and I'm like piecing things together, and then I'm like, as I'm doing it, I'm like, but that's not what this article says. And then I look for another 5 articles and I'm like, this one says this. And then I'm like, so I have like, so when I look back at my notes, I'm hoping this makes sense. But yeah, we'll see how this goes. It definitely went longer than I planned. And there's a few little like nuances to this one that make it a little bit harder to know like what's 100% like.
Okay, wait, what's that noise? It's bothering me. Was that Buster?
He's licking.
Okay, because it sounds like someone's
it's
typing
like
or moving your computer. And I thought
like
the noise was here.
I'm gonna put a blanket on that. I'm gonna put a blanket on my leg, and then he will hopefully not lick my leg. Yeah. Okay, so
we're ready.
We are ready. Oh, and I met someone and I told them about our murder podcast because we were talking about true crime, and they're actually from. She or her husband was actually from this town where this happened, and so then we were like talking. I was like, I'm doing the case there. Yeah, and I thought I had pictures of this location, and I can't find them. So,
oh no.
I was like, should I wait and do this case once I go back and get pictures and stuff? But I'll later go back and we'll re-advertise it later and be like, go back and see this one. So, yeah, because I've been to the spot and I've seen the location and the memorial and all that stuff. And I swear I took pictures and I'm sure they're somewhere. I just don't know where. So, all right. So we are doing the Holcomb murders. And so back in Kansas, go figure. I'm just
what a surprise. she's not even trying to find one. No, not true. Last time you had Missouri. It was Kansas City. So I mean, you know. But
sorry, people. This is turning into like Canada versus Kansas.
It's okay because Kansas is my favorite state anyway. Just so you
know. And I promise I'm gonna do the pain and gain one.
Yes.
Eventually. I just like I was so overwhelmed with teaching and I had a killer cold last week and I was knocked on my butt all week last week, and I was like, so then I crammed, and then I went to Texas this weekend, and so I crammed this week to get this case done. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do a case that I'm kind of familiar with. And so I was like, I know about this one. I always struggle with like researching and finding the cases. I know they're all over, but so we're back in Kansas.
Surprise, surprise.
So I learned about this one actually because I had heard of it, but then road tripping with James's aunt and uncle, we they were like, oh, let's go stop and see the memorial for this murder. And so we stopped at the park and saw the memorial. And then James's uncle actually like drove us up to the house. And then we like turned around because a German Shepherd started chasing us. So we're like, we're going to get shot. So let's leave and not be in this people's property. And so,
Wait,
so we
I
drove
don't
up to the house.
understand. Why were you on someone else's property?
Well, his uncle drove up to the house to go show us the farmhouse up close.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Yeah. And then the German Shepherd like came and barked at us and we're like, let's go.
Leave.
But his uncle is one of those ones. So it's like, we can go see this. And so we drove up there to get a closer look and then we turned around. So I have pictures somewhere and I can't find them. So I'm going to go back again and take photos. But all right. So we're in rural southwest Kansas in a town named Holcomb. And it's about 7 miles west of Garden City, Kansas, and 60 miles from Dodge City. And then it's about like 65 miles from Colorado. So it's not like super far. But Garden City is where like James and he grew up in a small town, and Garden City was where they would go for like their shopping and Walmart and all that stuff. And so Holcomb is just like a little tiny town outside of it, and they also go to Garden City for everything that they need out there. And so the population is like 2,000 people. And in 1959, when the crimes happened, there were only 270 people living there. And so it was a very small town back in the 60s, right before the 60s. They have a few businesses, but it's mostly residential. And like I said, people go to Garden City for anything that they need. But the population there got way bigger when big industry was built in the area. And so in the 1980s, the Sunflower Electric Corporation plant was built, and then Tyson's food plant. And you probably heard of Tyson. I don't know if you've heard of Tyson's meat packing. So Tyson's like a huge meat packing industry. It's the largest meat packing plant in the world. And they opened up one in 1980.
In the middle of nowhere?
Yeah, but there's like tons of ranches and cattle and
I guess
stuff out in the area. And so the factory opened in 1980 and then was bought by Tyson in 2003, and it provides 3,000 jobs to the community. So it's a pretty big company. You need to stop licking. Buster is like,
for someone who doesn't
everything.
know it's Buster. Context.
Stop licking, Val.
It's Buster's, not me.
So, let's do a little, I don't know. We can do our little background on, do we do the background of the murderers first?
No, whatever you feel it.
Right. I don't know. Okay, let's do before the crime first. All right, here we go. As if you care which order we do this in. This is me being, my meds aren't working right. So, okay, it all began in the fall of 1948. Floyd Wells was 19 years old and drifting around the country taking various jobs that he could find. So eventually he found himself in western Kansas near Colorado, and he learned that help was needed at River Valley Farm, which is Mr. Clutter's farm. Floyd worked for Mr. Clutter for the winter and then decided to continue moving on. He said he just got restless, but nothing like happened to make him want to leave the farm. He kind of just like, I think was really restless and moved around the country all the time. And so he said he really liked working for Mr. Clutter, and said that Mr. Clutter was always willing to give out a 10 or a 5 if you were short before payday, and he paid good wages and would give bonuses to those who deserved it. So he was a good employer and people liked him. He and his wife, Mr. Clutter and his wife and their 4 kids were a really nice low-key family that people all liked. And so after leaving the farm though, Floyd got married, divorced, went in the army, and then in 1959, 10 years after working for Mr. Clutter, he was sent to Lansing prison because of, he wanted to start a lawnmower rental service. So he broke into an appliance store to try to get lawnmowers.
As one does when you want to start a company.
Yeah. So you kind of have to buy your own if you want to start the company. So then He was given 3 to 5 years in prison, which is when he met Richard Hickok. And he goes by Dick and Richard, and so I kind of bounce between the two
I'm
names.
sorry.
He is
Richard
Dicky.
Hickok, you're telling
Yeah.
me that his nickname is Dick Hickok. I am not mature enough to not laugh at this.
I'll try to remember to say Richard.
Yeah, we're gonna call him Richard because I will laugh every single time.
I'll try and remember to say Richard. Well, okay, it's one of those things where all the articles first said Dick, and then the other articles said Richard. And so, hold on. James, can you take Buster? James?
Oh my God, look at his little face.
Go get James.
Oh my God, is that Daddy?
James.
Look at him.
Go get him. Go get him. He like wants me, but he keeps licking.
Yeah, he doesn't want to move from there.
No, he's like, wants me right now. Hi. Okay, I'll try again later. Okay, so sorry, people. Dog issues. He just keeps panting, and I'm afraid he's gonna like annoy the. Okay, you can lay there if you're gonna sleep. He like pops his head back.
No, cutie.
I'll be good.
So,
Right.
Dick Hickok.
So, Richard Dick Hickok. He was.
I am an adult. I am mature.
She didn't just take any edibles before this either. So
I'm pretty sure sober people think it's hilarious.
Well, and every time I kept reading it, it only said Dick, but I never saw that his last name was Hickok until later too. And so then I'm just like, yeah.
What are the odds?
Okay, so Richard and Floyd celled together for the first month of Floyd's sentence, and Richard was he was just finishing a 3 to 5 year sentence and was due for parole in August. And so he talked all the time about what he would do when he got out. And he said he would go to Nevada, buy a uniform, and pass himself off as an Air Force officer. And so big plans. He also would mention his friend Perry and discuss the big deals that he and Perry would maybe pull off when they got together again. And so Floyd had never met Perry. It's Perry Smith. So Perry never met Perry as he was already out of Lansing on parole. But Richard would say that if the chance of a big score came up, he would rely on Perry to be his partner. And so he's kind of already like plotting his next move after he gets out of prison. So he's not very reformed because he's spending his whole time in prison planning his next move. And so Richard and Floyd began talking one time about past jobs that they'd had and work they had done. Richard was a trained car mechanic, but he had also been an ambulance driver, and he would brag about what he had done with nurses in the back of the ambulance. Really stand-up guy, because he's also married at that time too. Of course. So Floyd then informed him about how he had worked a year on a big wheat spread in western Kansas for Mr. Clutter. And Richard wanted to know if Mr. Clutter was wealthy, and Floyd told him he was, and that he had once spent $10,000 in 1 week running his operation. That would be a lot of money in 1959 too.
I feel like it's a lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a lot of money now, but yeah. So at this point, Richard became super interested in the Clutters, and he would ask about the family, the age of the kids, how to get to the house, what was the layout, and did Mr. Clutter keep a safe? So Floyd told him he thought he had a safe since he had seen something behind the desk in Mr. Clutter's office, but he really wasn't sure that it was a safe. So Richard then began talking about killing Mr. Clutter. And he also talked about, because Mr. Clutter had a 16-year-old daughter, and some of the articles said that Richard also wanted to rape the 16-year-old, is what some of the articles said, and that he kept talking about that also, and he was like obsessed with the 16-year-old. And there were different articles that said different things, but that was what one of the articles focused on, is that he also wanted to go after the 16-year-old. And so
yeah, no, leave her alone. Go away.
Yeah. So he said that he and Perry Smith were going to go out and rob the place and kill all the witnesses, the Clutters, and anyone else who happened to be around. And so he described numerous times how he would do it and how they would tie the people up and gun them down. Floyd said he told Richard he would never get away with it, but never really tried to persuade him away from it because he thought it was all just talk. And lots of the prisoners would like talk about what they would do when they got out and just like brag all the time. And so he didn't think Richard was actually serious about it. And so let's, okay, so now that kind of sets the scene of where this was at before. And now we have a foreshadowing of what's about to happen. So fast forward to the Clutter family. So we have Herbert Clutter, he's 48. Bonnie Clutter is 45. Kenyon Clutter, 15. And Nancy Clutter is 16. They also had 2 kids named Beverly and Eviana, who were older and living outside of the home.
Who are those 2?
The older 2 live outside the home. They're the older daughters.
Okay, so they had 4.
They had 4 kids, but like 2 were adults. And so one of them was married in Illinois and one of them was in nursing school in Kansas City.
15 and 16.
No, the older 2. So there were 2 older ones out of the house. And then Nancy was 16 and Kenyon was 15 and they were both at home.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah. But 2 of them were already like grown and moved out.
Okay.
And so they were a family of 6 and were farmers in Holcomb, Kansas. They lived in a large farmhouse with 14 rooms, huge farmhouse, and acres of agricultural land all around it. So Herbert had made a fortune by using new technology to grow wheat and had been interviewed by the New York Times about his pioneering move at the time. And again, in Kansas, wheat is huge. And so with him making this new technology, like it sounds like he made bank. And so he was pretty involved in the church and was on many city committees. And Bonnie, supposedly there were mixed reviews about whether Bonnie had, the wife had some depression. Some say she had like postnatal depression and was like really depressed. But then other people say she was like a happy-go-lucky woman who played a big part in the community and attended the gardening club. And then some say she did have depression, but it wasn't like as bad as what it said in like there was a book about it. And so the book would made it sound a little bit more exaggerated, supposedly. And then Nancy was said to be the darling of the town, and she was an excellent student and musician. She was kind, intelligent, and class president and leader of the 4-H program. And then Kenyon, one article said Kenyon was also involved in 4-H, but it also said he was kind of a loner and enjoyed disassembling electronic gadgets and rebuilding them. So just normal 16 and 15-year-old teenagers. And again, Holcomb was home to less than 300 people in 1959, and everyone knew everyone. So the Clutters were known to be an upstanding family. And when Perry and Richard learned about the Clutters, they believed they kept a large amount of cash at home. However, Herbert was a frequent check writer, and it was said that he even wrote a $1 check for a haircut and kept almost no cash in the house. And so their wealth was well known, though, around town, and it was this knowledge that ultimately led to their deaths, was their wealth. And so let's learn a bit about Perry and Richard. So Richard Hickok, aka Dick Hickok. I had to say that right when you She's taking a drink of water right now, which is the perfect timing to say that. So he was 28 years old. Now looking back, like 28 is so young.
It's very young.
It's like not that old. So he's 28, blonde hair, blue eyes, 5'10", 175 pounds. And the KBI agent involved said that she looked at like photos that her husband brought home, and she said his eyes were as forbiddingly criminal and reminded her of a bobcat that she had once seen in a trap, and how the cat's eyes, even though radiant with pain and hatred, had drained her of pity and filled her with terror. Pretty good description of his eyes, though.
That's very deep. Is that from a novel?
That's apparently just what his wife said, because she said his eyes like reminded her of the evil like bobcat's eyes when it wanted out of the trap, but it also wanted to like attack.
Mm-hmm.
And so according to Richard's father, He was an outstanding athlete and he was always the star player. He was a good student, getting A's in several subjects. In 1949, he wanted to go to college, but the family didn't have the money to send him. So he went off to work for the Santa Fe Railway in Kansas City. So far, it sounds like the only problem in his childhood was that his parents didn't have the money to send him to college, but he had like a normal childhood. No getting hit on the head. Yeah. No abusiveness, nothing. He went off to work for Santa Fe Railway and he made $75 a week. So he and his girlfriend got married. She was 16 and he was 19. They had 3 children together, and he and his wife rented a house, had a fancy car, and were often in debt. And so Richard also drove an ambulance, and we know that he was doing things in the back of the ambulance apparently. So not the most faithful husband. And then he got hired on as a mechanic and a car painter for Markle Buick Company in Kansas City. He and Carol, his wife, kept living above their means, and so Richard started writing bad checks. He had also gotten in a car wreck and gotten a concussion, and after that, they said he began gambling and writing more bad checks. And then he left his wife, Carol, for his mistress. So he started to kind of be an asshole. The dad of him then said that he said Richard was sent to prison for borrowing a hunting rifle from the neighbor's house, but never planned to steal it. Not really sure what that means, but it sounds like Dad's kind of defending him a little bit. When he got out of prison, though, they said he was like a stranger and acted as though the whole world was against him. His wife left him and he began working for a body shop and living at home until he took off again. And then we have Perry Smith, who's 27. He's only 5'4", 156 pounds, so short little dude. Mm-hmm. Brown hair. According to the KBI agent's wife, he had an arrogant face, tough but refined, and had eyes with a moist, dreamy expression. Pretty and sensitive, but also mean. This wife is very descriptive.
I have a question. What is KBI?
Kansas Bureau of Investigation.
Okay, it makes sense.
I'm glad I remembered that off the top of my head.
Yeah, because I was like, wait, I don't know this one.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the local FBI, but it's like the Kansas's department of it. Yeah. She's very descriptive in her, like, what she says about these criminals' faces. So he was born in Nevada and had 3 siblings. His parents, Tex, an Irishman, and Flo, a Cherokee, were rodeo performers. And in 1929, the family moved to Juneau, Alaska, where Tex made a living distilling bootleg whiskey. He was abusive to his wife and their children, so she took them to San Francisco. But then she was also an alcoholic and died from choking on her vomit when Smith was 13.
Oh my God.
So he had the abusive childhood and was like an orphan, or not orphan, but because his dad was alive, but brought away from his dad. So he and his siblings were placed in a Catholic orphanage where he claimed he was abused there as well for his bedwetting habit. He was then in a Salvation Army run orphanage where he claimed an attendant tried to drown him. So he kind of had a little bit of a shitty childhood, especially compared to Richard. His brother committed suicide at an early age. One of the reports I found said that the brother shot his wife and the next day shot himself. I only found that on one article, but and then his sister apparently committed suicide after jumping out of a hotel window. And one article said she got hit by a taxi. And so he lost like most of his siblings and his family. And then his other sister got married and had a family and broke all contact with him. And so he joined the U.S. Army, served in the Korean War, and had a record for getting into fights with other soldiers and Korean civilians. After being honorably discharged in 1952, I'm not sure how he got honorably discharged after all like the fighting and stuff, but apparently he did. He got a job as a car painter, and he used his first paycheck to buy a motorcycle, which he then crashed and spent 6 months in a hospital recovering from. So he then had chronic leg pains and had like walked with like a limp and became addicted to aspirin. I didn't know you could become addicted to aspirin, but at least it's not worse than aspirin, I guess. In 1956, he was sentenced to 5 to 12 years in prison for breaking and entering. And then he served time at the Kansas State Penitentiary, which is when he met Richard. So All right. So now we have the crime. So now Richard gets out of prison and decides to meet up with his buddy Perry. And so on November 14th, Richard Hickok and his former cellmate Perry Smith made their way to the Clutter's home nearly 400 miles away in their black 1949 Chevrolet. Before heading to the farm, they purchased rubber gloves, a flashlight, nylon rope, adhesive tape, and a knife. They then drove into Garden City where they got gas and then to Holcomb up to the Clutter residence. When they got to this, so there's like a really long tree-lined driveway to get to the Clutter's house. And when they were driving up, they noticed a light on in the tenant house, which I think is like the field worker, like one of the workers' houses to the southwest of the main residence. And so they started to leave, but then the light went out, so they turned around and went back. And so then they parked on the side of the Clutter home. And on the night of the murders, the parents and teenagers, Nancy and Kenyon, were at home. But again, the two oldest children were away from home. So Eviana was living in Illinois with her husband, and Beverly was studying nursing in Kansas City. It said Bonnie was dealing with some pain, and so she moved into a separate bedroom to help herself sleep better. And then after everyone was asleep, Richard and Perry snuck into the home through an unlocked door. Because again, we're living in a town with 270 people, and like no one locks their doors. Yeah. So they woke up Herbert and demanded to know where the safe was with the $10,000, but Herb didn't own a safe. And so Hickok and Smith put all the members of the family in the second floor bathroom and searched the house for the safe and money. They then took Mr. Clutter to the basement and tied him hand and foot on a mattress carton in the furnace room. And then it said Kenyon, the boy, was then taken to the furnace room and tied to a pipe on the north wall near his father. Mrs. Clutter was tied hand and foot to her bed, and Nancy was tied hand and foot in her bed. So they kind of separated everyone throughout the house. And then they taped Mrs. Clutter's mouth shut. They then moved Kenyon to a couch in the recreation room away from his father. And so they ended up, at the end of the night, they ended up stealing a small transistor radio, a pair of binoculars, and $50 in cash. Is all they ended up stealing after this whole.
Even for the 50s, that's not a lot.
Yeah. So they didn't really get much out of any of this. And so instead of just letting the family go free, since they didn't have the money, they cut Herb's throat with the fishing knife and then shot him in the head with a shotgun. Super brutal. They then shot, and I don't understand why they needed to slice his throat first either. Like, it was just.
Were they high on something?
No,
They're just fucking crazy.
Yeah, and they just went murder happy. So then they shot Nancy and Bonnie in the head also, and Kenyon was shot in the face. So it said that a few hours later, because this was like in the middle of the night, so a few hours later, and it was a Saturday, Nancy was supposed to go to church in the morning with her friend, and when she didn't go to church, her friend came by. They called the police, and the police went to the house to check on them. And the sheriff and the officers from Garden City arrived and discovered the horrific scene inside the home. So Bonnie and Nancy were found in the rooms that they had gone to sleep in, but Herb and Kenyon were found in the basement. Kenyon had been tied to a sofa with a pillow under his head and shot. And then again, Herbert had been tortured. And one article also said he had been hanged from a pipe in the basement. And so, and according to one article on Criminal Minds Wiki, Hickok was considering raping Nancy, but Smith stopped him and said he apparently was against rape, but willing to commit murder. So apparently drew the line. He drew the line somewhere. And so he supposedly told him, if you touch her, I'll kill you. So they then agreed to eliminate the Clutters as witnesses. And there was one article that said something about how Perry almost killed Richard after this, like where he considered like eliminating Richard as a witness too. Because again, these guys weren't necessarily the most stable, and I don't know that they really had each other's backs. I mean, they had only met in prison together, and I think Richard liked that Perry talked up. I think Perry had talked himself up more as like a murderer, but he hadn't really been caught for anything super serious either. Like, he kind of just talked a big game. And so, yeah, I mean, their whole friendship is based on their prison friendship and their tall tale stories. And so the house was then filled with police and the Kansas City Bureau of Investigation, the KBI, doctors, a minister, reporters, and photographers. Alvin Dewey from the KBI had known Herbert and began working to find the people who killed him. Over 600 people attended the funerals of the family members in a town of 270 people. So a lot of people knew the Clutter family. And it was so sad. They said the funerals were open casket, but they had cotton covering their faces, which would be so sad.
Oh, just close the casket.
I know, right? So after developing photos taken from the crime scene, the team discovered that under ultraviolet light, a boot print was visible in the image. All of the victims were barefoot, so the print could have only belonged to the killer. And this is pretty much their only clue that they had to go on. They had nothing else to go on besides this boot print. And so it was a few weeks later around Christmas when the director of the KBI in Topeka called Dewey to let him know that Floyd Wells, a prisoner at Kansas State Prison, knew who the killers were and was willing to talk in exchange for the $1,000 reward money and early release from prison. So Floyd Wells is literally the only one that has any clue who these murderers would have been. So as it turns out, Floyd was laying in his bed in the Lansing prison when he heard over the radio about the tragic slaying of the Clutter family. So he instantly recognized the name and knew what had happened and knew that Richard had actually gone through with it. So he was afraid to tell the warden, though, because then his life wouldn't be worth a dead coyote. Interesting phrase. But again, he was going to be considered a snitch in prison, is basically what he was saying. Okay. And so his life wouldn't be worth anything if he told. So for a week, he monitored the radio and newspapers and learned about a $1,000 reward for any information leading to the capture and conviction of the guilty. He was still afraid to speak up, though, because he was afraid of the other prisoners. And he also feared that he would be considered an accessory to the crime, since he was the one to tell Richard about the Clutters. And so he thought that he could potentially get in more trouble then. So another 10 days went by and Floyd confided in another prisoner. And this prisoner was a very religious Catholic friend. And so the Catholic friend told him that he would feel less guilty if he would just get it off his chest and tell. And so the friend figured out a way to get word to the deputy warden, who then called Floyd to his office, and Floyd began to tell him the whole story. And he said his fear of telling went away as he remembered Mr. Clutter and how he had been good to him and given him a purse with $50 in it at Christmas time, and knew that like Mr. Clutter wouldn't have done him wrong. And so he wanted to be fair to Mr. Clutter. And so the warden then handed the telephone Logan Sanford, director of the KBI, who then called Alvin Dewey, KBI agent in Finney County, Kansas, where the Clutter murders took place. And so now they kind of have their suspects, and he's burrowing behind the chair right now. Sorry. He doesn't like light. He doesn't like that the light's on in my room.
Okay, because apparently Louis is like, bitch, where's my water? It's just smacking the damn bowl.
Our pets are being weird tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we have Dr. Nye, or Detective Nye. So we're going to follow this investigator as he is going to go and he is going to try and trace the steps of Richard. And so Detective Nye discovered that on November 20th, Richard Hickok went on a Kansas City shopping spree and passed 7 pieces of hot paper. I think that means bad checks. I think hot paper is the same as hot checks. Okay. Couldn't find out for sure, but I'm pretty sure that's what it means. Because it said he passed the 7 pieces of hot paper. So I'm pretty sure he's like writing bad checks. Each of the salesmen identified the picture of the suspect as the one they had seen in their store, along with Perry Smith, who they said was his silent accomplice. One salesman said Hickok did all the work and was a smooth talker and very convincing. So then Agent Nye then interviewed Hickok's last employer at the body shop, and he said that he never saw him after the 19th or 20th of November when he took off without notice. A week before he left, the owner had a little party, and Dick brought his friend Perry. He said Perry could play guitar and sing, and that he was really strong, and neither seemed very nervous. And so this is all like after the murders. I believe that party was after the murders. So then detective went to neighboring homesteads of the Hickocks and asked about the suspect. One farm wife said, "Oh shit.
Oh shit."
No, I messed up. So one farm wife, he was asking about the Hickocks, and one farm wife said, "Dick Hickok, don't talk to me about Dick Hickok." I can't say. She's like, "Dick Hickok, don't talk to me about Dick Hickok. If I ever met the devil, steal the weights off a dead man's eyes." She said he would have gone to jail more. So apparently she hates Richard Hickok. She said he would have gone to jail more often, but people didn't want to prosecute out of respect for his parents.
That's how it works.
Right? So they don't want the parents to like live in shame, so they didn't prosecute him for apparently stealing a lot. So Detective Nye then went to the Hickok's farm and talked to the parents about his parole violation and financial fraud. The dad said it was Perry who put him up to writing bad checks and that they didn't like Richard associating with him. They said Richard spent every spare minute with him, though, and they once went on a weekend trip to Fort Scott, a Kansas town with a military history. Perry had a sister who lives in Fort Scott and was holding money for him, $1,500, according. And again, remember, Perry's sister cut herself off from him because they later talked to Perry's sister, and she's like, "Shit, no, I have nothing to do with Perry." And she was like living in California at the time. And so they find out that like he really didn't go to Fort Scott to meet his sister. And so they said that Mr. Hickok, the dad, said that Richard and Perry drove to Kansas to collect the money, and it was just an overnight trip, but they were back on Sunday on time for dinner. This weekend trip happened Saturday, November 14th, and they returned Sunday, November 15th, and the murders happened November 14th. And so he then, Richard came back home alone and said he left Perry at the hotel in Olathe, but he was acting just as normal as ever. But he did fall asleep while watching basketball, which was unusual for him, and he seemed unusually tired. So this is all like the day after the murder. So he's basically acting normal at home after he had just slaughtered a family. But then he was tired and fell asleep during basketball. So that was unusual, but that was it. But then Detective Nye saw a hunting gun in the corner, and Mr. Hickok said it belonged to Richard, and he would go out shooting every once in a while, mostly rabbits. It was a 12-gauge Savage shotgun model 30D. He had had it for about a month and had only used it once in a pheasant shoot. And said Richard had bought it on credit for over $100. And turns out, of course, this is the shotgun. Not very smart, just like leaving it out and open at his parents' house. So he just left it sitting there, though. So Detective Nye checked the dates of Mr. Hickok and asked if they stayed overnight with the sister in Fort Scott. Mr. Hickok said they could never find her, and apparently she moved, but he still stayed overnight somewhere.
Sure.
Yeah. So they knew that he like didn't actually meet the sister in Fort Scott, but said that they still just were somewhere. So while looking for Perry and Richard, it turns out that they were on a cross-country road trip and had been cashing fraudulent checks everywhere they went. After leaving the Clutter house, they had driven to Garden City and then turned east on the county line road. They eventually stopped, and while Richard cleaned the victim's blood from the shotgun with water from the car radiator, Smith dug a hole with a knife and buried the 4 expended shotgun cartridges and unused rope and tape left over from the murders. They then drove east toward Edgerton and stopped at a roadside park where they burned some of their clothing that had blood on it and the gloves that they had worn. They then reached Olathe, Kansas, which is near Kansas City, about 11 a.m. Sunday morning, November 15th, where Smith registered at a hotel under a fake name, and Hickok went home to his parents in Edgerton and acted like everything was normal. Several days later, though, they left the Kansas City area and drove to Mexico City, where they sold the car and the radio and binoculars. Supposedly, they sold the last two items to a traffic policeman. So it's interesting that they would have like given the radio and binoculars to the cop. And then they sold their car. And then they went to California, then Casey, and then eventually Las Vegas. It was also said that they were hitchhiking from California to Nebraska, where they stayed before heading back to Kansas City. And then they also went to Florida at one point too. So they kind of just made their way. There was no...
It's California, and then Nebraska is above Kansas, no?
Yeah. And I still can't figure out from all the articles if they went to like Florida first and then Mexico. I don't know. They went to every state around the country.
They drove around.
So then they were hitchhiking from California to Nebraska, where they stayed before heading back to Kansas City. And then they went on to Florida. And one of the stories said that on their way to Nebraska, the two men hitchhiked and they planned to murder the man who drove them. But one of the guys was taking too long trying to get, they were like making small talk, and the other one was like trying to get him to hurry up and kill him. But then they ran into another guy that was hitchhiking. And so the driver stopped to pick up this hitchhiker. And so their plan failed because they were planning to kill him and then put his body in the field and take his car. But then they left that plan when they picked up the hitchhiker. And so
don't pick up hitchhikers. It's like we've had too many horror stories about hitchhikers,
right?
Whether it's the hitchhiker, but mostly the person picking him up.
Yes. So
don't hitchhike. Never.
Don't do it. Where's that other part? Oh, so one of the some people also speculate that there were, so in the Florida area where they were at the same time that they were in Florida, or there had been sightings of them in Florida, there was the Walker family deaths on December 19th, 1959, which is when they were supposedly in the area. And these are unsolved murders. They had been spotted at least a dozen times between Tallahassee and Florida. And while there, like around the time they were there, Christine Walker, 24, was raped and shot. Cliff Walker, 25, was shot. Jimmy, age 3, was shot. And Debbie, age 1, was shot and drowned.
Oh, that's terrible.
And those are all unsolved murders, because they said that Smith and Richard passed a lie detector test about the murders, but people suspect that the test was faulty.
It doesn't mean it wasn't them.
Yeah, exactly. And they had the bodies of Richard and Smith exhumed to test the DNA further, but they still don't know. Like, it was kind of too late. Like, the evidence wasn't super clear on if they possibly did it.
No.
And so they were then in Las Vegas, and when they were there, they were apprehended on December 30th while picking up a parcel at the post office. Smith had mailed himself a box of belongings from Mexico, which included the boots that he wore during the murders. I don't know why he didn't ditch those boots.
Yeah.
But apparently he mailed himself the boots.
Not the
and
brightest.
They went to, yeah, not necessarily the sharpest guys.
Yeah.
So local police noticed the Kansas license plate on the Chevrolet, and they had mugshots of the two men. And so they checked the plates of the car that they were driving and discovered that it had been stolen in Iowa. So the cops tailed the car until it stopped at the Victory Hotel, and they pulled ahead of the Chevy and arrested Hickok and Smith for vehicle theft and violating parole. And then they notified the KBI and Alvin Dewey. So ironically, the post office where the men were found in Las Vegas and where they picked up the package is now the location of the mob museum in Las Vegas. So there's like a big mob museum.
Like
there.
MOB?
MOB, like the Russian mob, or the mobsters, like a mobsters museum.
No. Also, why would you have a museum of that? That's weird. Oh no, I think we lost Kate. Oh, you're back. Whew. You froze.
That was a close one. Yeah, you froze too for me. The mob museum, so like mobsters.
Yeah, I think it's weird that to have a museum on them.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like a history museum kind of thing where you can go and
Okay,
like
still.
read about all the different stuff.
It's like
And so,
the Bender days. Like
right?
Prime Days, which was episode 3, I think.
Yeah, that one was crazy.
Yeah.
The Bender,
But okay.
Bender days. Yeah, so then okay, so they captured them and on June, but they still didn't like have any proof that right now they were just holding them for breaking their parole. And so on January 3rd, 1960, KBI agents recorded Hickok's interrogation. Richard said he met Smith in Kansas City and they planned to go to Fort Scott, Kansas to see Smith's sister, who had a wad of cash waiting for her brother. But they couldn't find her, so instead they went to an area where they could find some sex workers and took them to a hotel where the women then robbed them. The KBI agents then told Hickok that they saw footprints at the murder site that matched the boots owned by him and Smith, and then told him about a living witness to the crime. So this news of a surviving witness shocked Richard, and he then pinned the whole thing on Smith and said that he killed everyone. So he instantly like broke as soon as he knew that there was a witness, and he was like, fuck, I'm screwed. And so it again also didn't seem very hard to like break them. They didn't really have to do
they were not exactly loyal to each other.
No, they were not loyal at all.
They had no reason, really.
No. So yeah, instantly Richard was like, Smith did it. So in March of 1960, Richard and Smith were put on trial in Garden City, Kansas, each for 4 counts of first-degree murder. According to Criminal Minds Wiki, it was never really known who killed who. At first, Smith claimed that he killed Herb and Kenyon, and Hickok killed Bonnie and Nancy. However, Hickok claimed that Smith killed all 4 family members, and Smith later changed his confession because he felt sorry for Dick's mother and didn't want her to go to her grave thinking that her son was a murderer. Their like sense of loyalty in this whole like
towards the parents,
yeah, it is really confusing to me. But so he stated that Hickok had chickened out and Smith had to kill all the witnesses, but he said he stopped Hickok from raping Nancy. And so, stop, don't bark. No. He's getting agitated. I don't know why. This is just the weirdest case description. Sorry, people listening. Come here. Are you gonna chill? Calm down. Okay, so Richard supposedly chickened out. Smith had to kill everyone. Well, didn't have to, but chose to. He could have chickened out also and not gone through with it. Smith also said, super creepy. So Smith said he liked Herbert Clutter and thought he was a very nice gentleman, soft-spoken. I thought so right up to the moment I cut his throat. What the fuck?
What?
Yeah. Such a dick. Yeah, just like psychopathic. So the case was really quickly closed due to police work and the photo of the bloody boot print, plus the pair had kept the murder weapons, and then the police confiscated them as evidence. And like I said, then there was this speculation that they possibly also killed the Walker family. So the pair were sentenced to death by hanging. They sat on death row for 5 years before being hung on April 14, 1965. So here's where a second thing comes into this, which is interesting, is that you've probably heard of this case at some point, maybe, because while on death row, they were interviewed extensively by author Truman Capote, who is doing research about the case. Have you heard of Truman Capote?
Yeah, it's the first time that I hear his name pronounced out loud, and it just like, oh.
Is that how you pronounce it? I don't know. I just think it's Truman Capote.
The way it's spelled in French means something. It means either, you know, when a car, in a car accident, when it goes, like the wheels are on top and that's called a capotage, or the verb is capote. Or in Quebec slang, when you're saying like you're freaking out, you're going to say like capote. So it's interesting, Capote.
Interesting. I wonder if, so is it the same meaning, I wonder?
Well, it's a last name.
I guess so.
It's an uncommon last name for me doesn't mean it's not common.
Stop. He's
Poor
going nuts.
Buster.
I don't know why he's so agitated. Go get James. Sorry, people. Go get James. This is the life of a pet owner.
Yeah.
While recording a podcast with the dog in the room. Because he won't leave. Shh. Shh. I think know he wants. Come lay down so we can finish. It's not that much longer. We're going to learn about Truman Capote. So, Truman Capote began researching the case to write a nonfiction murder story. And he was also the author of Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Mm-hmm.
And so he became a good friend of Perry Smith. And apparently he related to Perry Smith because of their rough upbringings. And some questioned if the relationship was platonic or if there was more to it. Because I believe Truman Capote had a partner and was gay. And so they think there might have been a little bit of crush happening here.
Would a
and
murderer?
Yeah.
Surely you can pick someone else.
Right? So Truman Capote, here's another twist to this case, which made researching all the more difficult. So Truman Capote, author of Breakfast at Tiffany's, became fixated on the case after learning about it in the media. And he traveled with Harper Lee to Kansas to interview everyone possible about the murders. Do you know who Harper Lee is?
I've heard that name before, but I don't know why.
They wrote To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So he traveled with Harper Lee and they were interviewing people. And Capote apparently didn't bring his press credentials to Kansas with him. And so at first, he was completely shut out by locals and law enforcement. Harper Lee agreed to help him for a fee of $900. And apparently she was super beneficial in the research because they liked her and they didn't like Capote. And so Capote, though, claimed that she was just kept him company and was helpful by making friends with the wives of people he wanted to meet. So he kind of completely downplayed her whole role in the research of his book.
What a dick move.
Yeah. But then others say that Lee actually played a larger role, and Lee was the one that asked most of the questions when interviewing some of the residents. And she was much more personable, and she knew how to meet and talk to people and helped smooth the way for Capote to get the interviews that he wanted. And so he's kind of a dick, which is why they don't talk anymore, or they didn't talk anymore after this, pretty much. So Capote worked on the research for his case and spent time with the killers in the Kansas State Penitentiary until the time they were executed. He at first had been denied visitation rights because he was not an immediate family member, but he later convinced leaders in the Senate to convince the governor to let him be on the visiting and mailing list. So he kind of went above the warden and stuff and got himself on the list. He conducted research, interviewed everyone he could, pored over court records and newspaper articles and letters, and compiled 8,000 pages of notes. Interestingly enough, he refuses to use a tape recorder or take notes during his interviews because he said it makes it seem more stressful in the interviews for the person being interviewed.
So you just write it down by memory?
Apparently, he said he had trained himself to memorize lengthy conversations.
He's trying.
Go away. James. Go get James. Go get him. He's ignoring you. Go up. Okay, every podcast night we don't have this issue because he sleeps with James out in the living room.
Yeah, not today.
And right now he's not sleeping with James in the living room. Sorry, people, this is just a mess. Okay. Go get him. Go. And then he just keeps coming back to me I'll be good. Course. Don't send me with James. Shh. He's just laying at my feet now. I don't want to go, James. James doesn't have food. Okay, so I love you to death. I really do. But you're annoying me right now. Lay down. I don't even know what he wants. I wish he could talk. Lay down. I want to keep going. We're almost there.
Make bacon or something.
I know he needs
something
to.
Smelly.
I think he's thirsty, but I don't have any water for him. Okay.
James does.
I know. And he won't go get James. Okay, so he claims that he could recall a 6-hour conversation with greater than 90% accuracy.
Sure.
So
Sure.
apparently he had this killer memory.
Okay.
So he said that In Cold Blood, the book, scraped me right down to the marrow of my bones. It nearly killed me. I think in a way it did kill me. Have you heard of the book In Cold Blood?
I don't think so.
You'll have to ask
Maybe.
Sean later if he's heard of In Cold Blood.
Yeah.
So after the book's publication, Capote became more dependent on drugs and alcohol, and his friendship with Harper Lee deteriorated, in part because of his lifestyle with the drugs and alcohol, and also because he failed to acknowledge her contributions to the novel. And he died of liver failure in 1984 at the age of 59. So it's hard to know. One of the things that was hard with the research is that a lot of the articles I would find would bring up In Cold Blood stuff from the book, and then it would also bring up different interviews that Capote had done with Smith. But again, he's not using a tape recorder or taking notes. It's all on his memory. And then also there's, it said that there was a chance that Smith and Hickok's accounts were kind of exaggerated because they were getting the chance to tell their story. And so they're making themselves sound all like, because it was them that were the ones saying like, oh, I almost shot Richard and then I changed my mind. So it was all like them talking. So it's hard to know like how much you can actually trust what their accounts were. And so there were, like I said, there were some discussions about them almost killing each other in order to not have witnesses. One of the actors in the movie said that it's likely that their two personalities combined created a sort of third personality that contributed to the murderous behavior. So like each of them by themselves likely wouldn't have gone on this murder spree,
like
but the two of them.
It's
the what?
Folie à deux. It's a French expression that I've heard so many times in podcasts, like two people feeding off each other, leading to terrible consequences.
Yeah,
like murder.
Yeah, and they're saying it's kind of like, when they say like watch who you hang out with, because that's gonna like play a role in like the type of person you become and stuff. So Capote's book was actually turned into a movie that was nominated for 4 Oscars. And it was filmed in Holcomb at the Clutter farm and at the State House in Topeka. And so in the trial portion of the film, 6 of the original jurors were used as actors. That would be interesting to be on the juror and then be an actor in it. And then the director bought the toilets used by Hickok and Smith on death row and used them on set of the film. But he couldn't convince to make it more accurate, I guess.
It's a toilet.
Right?
Okay,
yeah.
sure.
But he couldn't convince them to sell on the prison gallows. So apparently he tried to convince them to let him buy the gallows for the movie, and they wouldn't. So McAtee, who was the prison lawyer, stated that the actor who played Smith was him reincarnated. He said he was a little cocky guy just like Smith. The actor who played Smith is actually, when this article was written in like 2002, Blake, the actor who played Smith, was facing charges of murder himself and is in a California jail for the 2001 shooting of his wife. So that's interesting too. So that the actor who played Smith was then on trial for murder himself later. And so so let's go back to the final hours of their death, because this is really interesting. I found a lot of this like tonight. I found this really cool article right before. So this Topeka attorney was interviewed and spoke about his interactions with Perry and Smith while they were on death row, because he was working in the prison and played a really key role in the executions. And he said that he came to know them as human beings more than murderers. And he said he befriended the killers, though he was repulsed by their deeds. And he weeps when reminiscing about the goodness he found in them. So I'm really I don't know. It's so weird because like from all the articles, it sounds like, neither of them were like murderous, like crazy people before. It seems like I said, like that third personality or whatever, like, I don't know. They're monsters and psychopaths, but at the same time, like apparently people saw humanity in them. I don't know. Apparently this guy and Capote did, because Capote was apparently obsessed with them. Smith, though, became an this is all according to the man, the lawyer who worked in the prison with them. He said that Smith became an introspective man and tried to find peace through painting, reading, and writing. He created biblical images and watercolors on bed sheets and memorized the book Thoreau on Man and Nature. It's so weird how much this guy decided to like really reminisce about like the good side of them on death row. He also said that Richard focused on his wife and children throughout his time on death row, and he wrote to his wife before his execution and asked her to put any royalties from books or movies about the killings in a trust fund for the children. She sent him a harsh letter back saying she didn't want to be part of anything that would help their offspring remember their father. But then on the day of his execution, boom, right? But then she felt bad. And on the day of his execution, she came to apologize, but the warden refused to let her see him and said that the prison was on lockdown. But Capote, the lawyer, intervened and allowed them to meet once more. And she apologized for the tone of her letter. And he said to tell the children he loved them. He then told Capote that he should have been hanged long before the Clutter murders for what he had done to his own family. It's interesting to think about like what's going on in the minds of like these killers when it's like they know it's their last day, and I'm like, if only you had given the Clutters a chance and not murdered them, and they could still be alive and you wouldn't be on death row right now. And it's like the Clutters never had the chance to like reminisce on anything or reflect or have any time to come to terms with anything. Like you took all that away from them by just murdering them. So Smith and Hickok asked Capote and Harper Lee to attend the execution. Capote agreed, but Lee declined. Good for you, Lee. Capote had promised to spend time with Smith and Hickok on their final day, but then at 2 p.m. he called and said he couldn't do it, and he would be at the execution, but he couldn't face them first. Another article said that he witnessed Hickok's execution, but then he ran out of the room before Smith was executed because he couldn't handle watching Smith executed. Like I said, I think they say there's possibly a little more, their friendship ran deep. So in his final hours, Richard pointed the finger again at Smith and said, "Perry killed them all." Still holding on to his own innocence in that way. Because he kind of basically said that like he shouldn't get death row because he wasn't the one that killed them, and that only Perry should get the death.
Yeah.
So then at 10:30, I love how this one had so much information about the deaths. Like a lot of times they don't really tell like this much info, but so at 10:30 p.m. the men both had a dinner of boiled shrimp and strawberry soda separately, but they both ordered shrimp.
Boiled shrimp.
Dinner of boiled shrimp. So they had.
Oh, I thought they had one.
No,
just one. I was like, what is that?
No. So they had their boiled shrimp and strawberry soda. Hickok, 33, was executed first and asked that his corneas be donated to KU Med Center. Really interesting request.
I didn't know that was possible back then.
Wait,
I didn't
when
either. Was this?
Stop. What year was they were executed in 19, I think it was like 19. They were on death row for like 5 years. Oh, 1965 was when they were hung.
I didn't know that. Wow. Okay.
I didn't either. Yeah, I didn't know
like
that they
that's
could do the
before my
cornea.
mom was born, and they were doing cornea transplants.
Apparently.
Huh.
Because apparently that's what he asked for them to be donated for. So.
Okay, sure. I want the cornea of a murderer.
Right. I don't want to see through those eyes.
Yeah.
Oh
and my God, just gave me shivers. I didn't like that one.
No. So then Smith, 36, went next and asked to use the bathroom first, and the warden refused, but Capote overruled it and let him go. Perry responded to this kindness by giving Capote a poem he had written. Smith's final words to Capote were, "I'd like to apologize to someone, but to whom? You know you can't undo what we did with an apology." Damn, you're right. You can't undo what you did with an apology. At least you had sense to know that much.
Before killing them.
Yeah, that would have been nice.
Yeah.
Richard was hung at 12:19 a.m. and pronounced dead at 12:41 a.m. That's 20 minutes before death was pronounced. That's a long time.
Do you know how they
were hung?
He could. Do you struggle for 20 minutes?
I don't know, because usually their neck snaps, but like
Yeah.
I don't know if like the neck snap, but then the
they
heart's still like
them
beating
there
or whatever.
for a while.
I guess so, because then Smith was hung at 1:07 a.m. and declared dead at 1:19 a.m.
Still hanging in the 60s. What?
And this McAtee guy said that he believed that everyone should be hung instead of lethal injection. I don't know if he thinks it was like a better way to go than lethal injection.
I guess.
I'm not really sure. But Truman Capote actually paid for small headstones for them, for their graves. Why Truman Capote did so much for these men,
why is he so obsessed with them?
I don't know. So he paid for their headstones, but they were stolen around 1980. Good for you, whoever stole those headstones. But then they were recovered 20 years later at an Allen County farm. And so that was that. And then, so Perry Edward Smith's, another report said his last words were, this one pissed me off. I think it's a hell of a thing that a life has to be taken in this manner. I think capital punishment is legally and morally wrong. So is murder. Yeah.
I agree. I'm on the fence about that penalty, but
I mean, it's like, I think they could also just get life in prison and deal with what they did forever. Yeah. But I mean, and it's like, it is a hell of a thing that life was taken that way, but it's not really any worse than what you did to the Clutter family.
Yeah.
And so, and then in the book In Cold Blood, Truman Capote said that he also stated, maybe I had something to contribute. It would be meaningless to apologize for what I did, even inappropriate, but I apologize. That's what Truman Capote said, he said. I'm not sure if that's true, if that's him just saying that because he likes Smith. And then Richard's last words were, I don't have any hard feelings. You're sending me to a better place. Probably not. I don't know about that. I don't know that you're going to a better place. I mean, I'm not the judge on that, but Truman Capote claimed, he said, I just want to say I hold no hard feelings. You people are sending me to a better world than this ever was. He also claimed that Hickok greeted the witnesses to his execution with a smile and said, nice to see you. Just strange altogether. That's just crazy to me. So their last words are really interesting. You're sending me to a better place. Why not?
I guess you found out.
Right, we'll see eventually. If you visit Holcomb today, though, you can see a park bench and a memorial plaque that was put up on the 50th anniversary of the murders in 2009. So I saw this plaque. This is one of the plaques that I stopped out at the park. So I'll eventually go get another picture of that. The memorial talks of the lives of the Clutters and gives attention to how they lived rather than how they died. The farmhouse is still standing and occupied today. And so
even though the murder took place in it?
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's how you get haunted houses, people.
Right. And there's been like, when I was talking to this lady that grew up in the area, she said there were always like ghost stories being told, and people would be like, there was blood on the walls, blood appeared on the walls, or they would, you know, like drive up the tree lined road and go see this haunted farmhouse. And so it was kind of like a big thing with like the teenagers and stuff. And it was interesting because she was saying that she remembered when her grandma sat her and the grandkids down and like told them the story of the Clutter family, because it was just, it's big story told there. And of course, the family isn't happy about the Capote book. And again, they didn't like how they portrayed like the mom, and said that the mom like didn't have that type of depression that Capote said she did, and he kind of like sensationalized it for the movie.
Yeah, that's not nice. If it's just for the drama.
Yeah. And some of the things were saying that they didn't really like check with the family before they did much of like the book or the movie and stuff. And so, but again, like they want to like, you know, let it rest and just think about like the positive memories. But in 1990, Leonard and Donna Mader bought the house, and they claimed that they had constant tourists on their doorstep. So they used to charge visitors $5 to tour the house. But then they were shut down for not having proper business licenses to charge for tours. So that business got shut down. And so then, like I said, there were like ghost stories that were told among teens, and it's still a pretty real like story for those growing up in the Holcomb area to this day. And so that is the Truman Capote story.
That's
the real life story of the Holcomb murders. And so if anyone's interested, you can read the book In Cold Blood, and you can also watch the movie In Cold Blood. And apparently the actors look just like, they're pretty close, like they look just like them. And I mean, I've seen mugshots of the killers, and like they just look like run-of-the-mill mid-20 men. Like they don't look stand outish at all. Like, I don't know, when I saw the pictures, they just kind of looked like your average men in the 1960s. Like, and so that was really interesting. And that's what people were saying too, when they saw them on like the courthouse steps. They were just like shocked at how like human they looked, because you know they're like monsters that slaughtered these people, but they just looked so normal. They weren't like tatted up, and they didn't look all crazy and stuff, but they just looked like these two normal dudes. And so that just, when they joined together, they went on some psycho murder spree. And it still just amazes me how like they went from like petty theft and writing bad checks and all that to like
murder. And like, not just like one, it
execution
was
style murder of like teenagers. And yeah, I'm still really curious about if they are the ones that did the Walker family case. I mean, it kind of meets the same description of the other one, but who knows? I don't know if they'll ever solve that case. But again, Kansas just is like full of,
I wonder what's in the air in Kansas. Why do you have so many murders?
Right?
Like you could go on for like 100 episodes and not run out of murder stories. Just
so I may Kansas. Just keep doing Kansas. We should have renamed our podcast.
Murders across Kansas.
Basically. Yeah. Well, and the whole like Truman Capote taking over really added to like the element of it, because I had always grown up hearing about the book In Cold Blood, and I've learned about it when I was a kid. I didn't realize Harper Lee was involved in the research of it and stuff, but apparently he never really wrote a successful novel after this either, though. He kind of, I think he did some like short writings, but they said it kind of just like, some of the articles said it really just like fucked him up, and he never really was normal after this. And like he couldn't finish his book until the executions happened, and so he had to like sit on the book for like 6 years, and he just kept visiting in prison and stuff. But yeah, so you'll have to, well, if you're interested, watch the movie In Cold Blood or read the book about it. It's definitely an interesting. Ask
Sean if he knows or if he has seen the movie.
I would think he would have heard of it.
Probably.
And I think it's interesting because I think there's so much like of the storytelling came from Smith and Perry, since he did, or Perry and Richard, since he did interview them so often. And so you kind of get a little bit of what their perspective was when they were like on the run. But they seem to have gotten caught pretty easy once they saw him in LA, and they didn't really put up much of a fight. But yeah, this whole thing was just interesting. It was one of the most interesting ones I've researched, with like all the like interviews with like the parents, and there were just so many things with this one that was crazy. So yeah, my really short case ended up turning into a little bit longer than I planned.
Almost an hour and a half. We always do that. At least it's not 2 hours, I guess. So yeah, thank you for the case, because I was not expecting a name dropping in there.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I just also think, like, how shitty does Floyd Wells have to be? I can't find what happened to him afterwards. Like, some of the things said that he stayed in prison for like 30 years later, and then some said that he died. So I haven't really been able to find like what happened to him afterwards. And so I need to keep researching that one. But like, if he hadn't had that conversation with Richard in the cell, none of that would have happened, and they would still be alive today. Like, just the chance encounter with the two prisoners, and
when the stars align, but the wrong way.
yeah, exactly. And it just completely changed the course of the lives of these people. And it's interesting too, because there's some random story, and I was talking to the lady that lives in the area, and she had heard that like one of the kids had been away at a sleepover and came back. And so that's some other murder story. But apparently that's the story James had heard, that's the story I had heard, that's the story this lady had heard. So there was like this weird story that like one of them had been away at a sleepover and then came back. So that must be it's probably another Kansas murder story where one of them was away. But I think they're also kind of getting it confused with the fact that like she was supposed to meet up with her friend, and then the friend got worried when she didn't show up for church the next morning and then went to check on him. And so there's just all sorts of different stories about it though. Cause I was talking to the lady and she's like, wait, like that's the story that I had heard too about like a friend going to a sleepover. And so, or the girl being away at a sleepover. So there's like the folklore or whatever, like the lore gets kind of like, gets a little bit mixed up here and there. And so, yeah, like I said, we're just going to stick with Kansas.
Yeah. Just, you have enough content for a minute.
Yep.
But
and this time I'm not waiting until 2 days before. I probably will.
I do it all the time. That's how I went through university. Like it's a miracle I graduated. I must be really good. Well, my job, I said it before, I'm a translator, and my job is literally like, I'm a translator. I put words from a language into another, and we keep on having rushes and rushes and rushes. And it's like, guys, we're not saving lives. All the requests cannot be rushed. Like, how do you prioritize an emergency? Just like the meme with the lady calculating. Well, okay, what's the most urgent from the urgents? But yeah, so before I forget, because last time we didn't do it because we ran way over
yeah, we've been here
an hour and a half. But Facebook, we're on Facebook at Murders Across Borders podcast, and the handle I believe is MAB podcast. We need to get posting. I'm terrible with social media. I'm too fucking old to
well, if anyone finds out why certain posts are showing up on my, we had a whole discussion about this mindfuck that my my phone Facebook is showing a podcast recording where I can listen to the audio of the podcast, but the computer, yeah, Val can't see it. And on the computer, when I get on our Facebook page, it's nowhere to be found. But on my phone, I have it. So I'm
post
really
a screenshot. We're gonna ask because
I will have to do that because I'm so confused as to how this even made it on to our Facebook page. Maybe it came from Buzzsprout or something. I'm not sure how it pushed out to it, but it's on there somehow. I don't know how.
And we have our Instagram at Murders Across Borders. My handle is at a grammar nerd. Kate is Adventures Without a Roadmap. I almost said Adventures Without a Podcast. That would be a really dope podcast name, but we cannot start another one. We can't do it.
Even though we joked about doing a TV show one.
And because I need to talk to you about 90 Day Fiancé. And we have if you want to write to us, if you have suggestions, comments.
Please give us suggestions because I need some suggestions, especially from people outside of Kansas. Because otherwise I'm just going to
Sean gave you 2. I think he's going to scream at you if he has to repeat.
He has 2 now?
It was Pain and Gain and the Foxcatcher. The guy with the DuPont pen.
Yeah. Sorry, Sean. I will do those 2 eventually.
Pain and Gain is the craziest one. And the Foxcatcher is because it's crazy what happened. But it cannot be as crazy and dumb as Pain and Gain. But and I need ideas in Canada because I'm gonna start every time I Google like true crime Canada, I get like the same 3 stories, and I already talked about the 3 stories, at least 2 of them. I don't remember. I have a blank on. Oh yeah, no, I remember. The first one was the Cult of Moses. So if you have any idea, our email address is murdersacrossborders@gmail.com. YouTube,
or message us on Instagram because we look at those messages often.
Well, I have a friend like a real life friend who messaged us. Oh, maybe it was on my blog, like on my a grammar nerd, but I saw the message like 4 months later because it wasn't a request, and I don't get notification for those, so I apologize.
I forget about those ones. I just forget to check our email, so I need to get better at checking the email. But
well, we got to 200 downloads, which
I don't know where they're coming from.
Like, we haven't seen growth on our Instagram or Facebook.
If you are watching these, please let us know where you're watching them from.
Yeah, we don't
and then
understand.
Review it, because we need reviews.
Or
otherwise it's never gonna go.
Just say hi. We're gonna be happy, like, hi, I'm listening, so we know there's at least one real person.
Yeah, because we keep getting all these things about this one was downloaded this many times, and this was downloaded, and now you've hit 200 downloads. Where are the downloads coming from?
Yeah, who are you? We want to know.
Who are you? What do you like? Do you repeat hear? What do you want to hear more of?
Yeah.
Sorry I ramble so much.
We're really good at rambling. We're not even at an hour and a half now. Like, no. I'm proud of ourselves.
We are doing really good.
Yeah.
That was like on it. When we started, she's like, no bullshit, we're talking. Yeah. You're starting the case now.
It might be the edible. Or the fact that
she threatened me before this.
Tired. Yeah. I think I didn't zone out, which is good.
You did good. Yeah. I'm bounced all over the place because there were so many interesting things that happened in different parts of the case where I'm just like, where do I go to now? Yeah. So sorry, people.
Yeah.
And then of course the dog.
I will have to stress out for 2 weeks to find my case. Like, I love doing that, but every time I'm like, oh my God, I need to pick a case now.
Do you know about the Chris Watts murder?
The who?
Chris Watts in Colorado.
No.
See, this is the other thing too. It's not Kansas, but it's so well known in Colorado because I'm from here. And I always think, oh, everyone knows about this case. It was so big and publicized, but probably a lot of people don't know about it. And so that's probably how it is for the Canadian ones too, though. There might be more Canadian ones that a lot of people don't actually.
I know a couple of cases, at least 2, but they involve child murder. And I'm like,
that was one I was considering doing.
Yeah, I don't know how comfortable I feel about it. It just breaks my heart to talk about it. So I don't know if I'm ever going to do them.
There's one that I kind of want to do about a child murder, but it's just one I had heard about growing up, and it's like a really sad one too, but it's interesting also though. Like, the story behind it's pretty interesting and sad, but I don't know. So if you're one of our 200 downloads, let us know if you want us to avoid those ones or go ahead and tell those stories.
Yeah, tell us, give us some case ideas. Who knows? Like, Canada is really big. So
see, and I just know these ones where it's like the Capotes, like, or the Clutter family. This was like a huge one in living in Kansas, and so I know them, and I forget that not everyone else knows these ones. And so
I don't have my hometown murder story anymore to rely on. If I need to finish editing. I started today, like 2 weeks later. I started editing. I'm really good at this.
But Val's also doing 10 times the work that I'm doing right now.
No, stop it.
She is.
Yeah,
I'm moral support.
Yeah. You tell stories, and that's important.
I tell Kansas stories.
That's good. I love Kansas. I have an obsession with Kansas.
Have I done a single story that's not in Kansas yet?
Well, there was Kansas City, Missouri.
But he was bouncing between Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri.
But it was also
and he's in prison in Kansas.
Yes, I guess
think all of my cases have been
Kansas
prisoners. Oh shit.
That's why I'm joking about it. I'm joking, but at the same time, it's true.
There's a lot here.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know. That's what I'm telling you. I don't know what's in the air in Kansas. You have a lot of murdered stories.
Yeah. And there's another hometown one that's a lot like this Clutter one that I know about. And I feel weird telling it since it's like a hometown one, but maybe I'll like do it as a little mini one at one of our, if I ever have like a short one, I'll tell just kind of a mini clip of that story, because there's some stuff that goes into that one. But yeah, that one was a lot like this one, but it was just more personal because we knew the people. And so I'll have to maybe tell that one sometime.
Yeah.
It's like that one's like literally a really short one because there's not a whole lot to go into with that one. But
we can make it last 2 hours. We're really good at this.
We're really good at that.
Yeah.
We can definitely make. And now Vester's chilling out. I'm like, why are you chilling out now that I'm like
He's
not
tired.
telling my story right now? I just love that I keep doing Kansas ones. It's my like procrastination. It's what I keep doing with my YouTube channel too, where I like have all these amazing hiking videos to post, and instead I'm posting recaps of trips, which no one wants to fucking hear the recaps of the trips, but those are easier for me to edit.
Yes.
And then I'm like, I still have all my summer hikes from last year that I haven't done videos about. And I'm like, oh my God. So I just like keep doing like these easier things, and then all the other ones keep piling up. So, which is why my YouTube channel sucks right now, because I'm not putting out.
I don't even fucking understand how to. I post it and then it's like, okay, it's posted. Look at it.
So freaking frustrating. Like I've been doing, sorry people, tangent. I've been doing YouTube shorts. I had one that got 2.9 thousand views. One that got 2.5 thousand views. And then my last one got 25 views. Ooh. What did I do wrong with my hashtags to drop down to 25?
Okay.
I'm like really confused.
Yeah.
And then like my Slack Canyon one got 73 views. I'm like, how is this happening? I'm not really sure. I did make it up to 357 subscribers though, and I was at 350 last week. So I went up 7. I think it's third graders finding my channel.
Probably.
Thank you, students. If I wasn't a teacher, I would have no followers. Yes. But my students like my videos apparently. And so
that's adorable.
Yeah.
But it's 10:30 here. I am dying. So we're gonna let you go. Yeah.
I'm gonna go watch Married at First Sight because it's Wednesday.
Yeah. And so bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.